Sonic Dorms. My name is Max, of course. Pleasure to meet you. I've got a very special guest on the show, and Leigh Matty. I'm a huge fan of your vocals, particularly during your work with Romeo's Daughter, which that first album to me is a classic record.
Thank you.
Whether it got the recognition or not doesn't matter. What matters is it's quality, and you can hear it every time you put it on. You can tell it's a labor of love. The songwriting and all that. So thank you for doing this with me. It really is a pleasure.
Thank you, Max. It's lovely to be asked. Thank you.
Absolutely. So one of the things I like to do, especially with first-time guests, is getting the full scope of the artist's trajectory throughout their career. So beginning with their roots. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with me your beginnings as a singer-songwriter.
Okay. God, we're going back a really long way, Max. I have to kind of go back into the deepest, darkest parts of my brain to remember all of this. But I think that, to be honest, I really only think of myself as being a proper artist when I met Craig from Romeo's Daughter, which was in 1984. We met, and we met on the phone. There was an advert in a music magazine that was really big here in the UK, and they were looking for a singer for their band, and he and I spoke on the phone, and we hit it off. And I really had not had much rock per se experience up till that point. I always thought I was going to be kind of more of an R&B singer. That was my, standing next to a piano. It was my idea of what, if I was going to be a professional singer, for me, that was what I was going to be. And then I met Craig, and I went and auditioned for Romeo's Daughter, although we weren't called Romeo's Daughter then. We were called lots of different things before we actually had to decide on a name. And there was just something about his songwriting, and there was just something about how I thought, wow, this is really empowering. Also, there were very few female rock singers around in the UK at that time. In fact, there were very few female rock singers around full stop. I mean, in America, obviously there were more, but in the UK, we were really behind in that whole genre of music. And so when I think about the stuff I did before Romeo's Daughter, it really wasn't important. For me, it all really started in 1984. I'd sung at school. I'd had like a funny little record deal that didn't come to anything. I think they thought I was going to be a country singer. It was all a little bit confused before Romeo's Daughter. And then I met Craig, and we started working together. We started writing together. And for me, that was the beginning of me becoming an artist in my own right, I suppose. Well, but obviously part of a fabulous band. So yeah, I'd say 1984. That was it. And I started, and I've never really looked back. It's quite interesting, actually, because I do get asked to do other projects and work on other projects, and in the past, and none of it really interests me. I only really have interest in singing Romeo's Daughter songs, which might seem a bit strange, but that's my baby, and for me, that is all I've ever really wanted to do as a singer.
It seems to me, it sounds like you really care about it's really about what's in here, right? It's about what's in the heart.
Absolutely.
For you.
Absolutely.
You're not just going to go do it for the money ever.
Oh no! Oh my goodness! If I'd have done it for the money, I would have been stopped many years ago. No, we've kept Romeo's Daughter going through love, really. It sounds corny, but there's not been really anything else. We've had no other support. We've had no record since our first record deal in 87, I think we signed to Jive. We've not had any support. We've not had any record label. We've done everything ourselves. We lead very busy lives. We all have businesses. We have families. We have lots of things that are going on in the background, and we really only do this because we love it so much. And the thought of not doing it is really a horrible thought. I don't even like to think about it, to be honest. It's scary for me to think about that.
Going into Romeo's Daughter, what was your voice like, as far as, like, I know Mutt Lange has a huge influence
Yeah,
on
as on
on
yes,
singers.
absolutely.
All the
Yes,
singers I've ever worked with him say that they're the first person that he like channels in on, as far as trying to get the best, because Mutt Lange is a singer himself, of course.
absolutely. He's a very
So,
good singer.
so
Yeah.
prior to you working with him and collaborating with him on that first record, where were you as a singer?
Actually, thinking back, Mutt was a pretty hard taskmaster, but I think he kind of liked my voice, which helps to begin with. And I don't think he, as far as I can remember, I mean, I remember being in the booth for hours and hours and hours, like everybody, but he's a little bit of like a control, well, he is a control freak with pretty much everything. And as far as I can tell with other singers, it got to some singers who I won't mention, but it was like syllables, you know what I mean? It was like every syllable had to be done. It was torturous from all accounts, from what I've heard from other people who've worked with him. It wasn't that way with me. I think with me, he knew that I was pretty inexperienced, but I think he quite liked working with me, and he just kind of coaxed the best performances out of me. I remember some songs were harder than others, and he really pushed the limit of my range. But on the whole, I don't remember it being an awful experience. I remember it being quite an enjoyable experience, and it really taught me that there were certain things that he got out of me, like when I listen back to the first album, there's a few quite quirky little things going on, and there's a little whoop and things like that, which I probably wouldn't have done myself, but a bit like, do you remember there was a thing called Lena Lovitch, and she used to do all these little funny little quirky things, and he got some things like that out of me, and I think I probably just incorporated them now into how I sing in general. But I don't think that he completely changed my tone or my style. I think he just kind of made it, maybe said to me, well, that's really good what you're doing, or that's not so good what you're doing. He was really a fantastic teacher for all of us. He really was. And we had a really lovely experience with him. We went and lived in his house. He had this incredible house in the UK, and we went just decamped there for like weeks on end, and we recorded, I think, about half of the album there, and the rest of it was recorded at Battery Studios, which is like this iconic studios that's not there anymore. And we were so young and naive, and we had no expectations, and I think he liked that. I think he liked that we just came, we were just very excited to be there, and we had no idea what was going to happen, and we were very unspoiled. I think we still are, to be honest, as a band. We're just grateful for everything that comes our way. We don't expect anything. And I think we were even more so maybe like that when we were all like 23, 24 years old. So we had a really wonderful experience with him. In hindsight, we didn't realize just quite how iconic the whole experience was, and how, we were like, oh, great, this guy wants to do some work with us. We knew he'd done some great work before, but we didn't think, oh my God, this is this incredible guy and we're scared to be there. We weren't like that. We just got on with it and made the best record that we could. And as you said, it still sounds pretty good today, I think. It still holds up because Mutt was such an incredible producer and songwriter, really, and everything, really. He was just so fantastic at everything. He probably still is, but I don't hear much of his work now, so I don't really know what he's doing. But then he was just at the top of his game.
Who were your vocal influences to begin with, as like from the very beginning? Who were those first people that really got you to develop yourself as a singer prior to getting into Romeo's Daughter?
Well, I mean, I think you know, my dad was very much into R&B and jazz, so that very much was my influence when I was young. But when I became a teenager and I started kind of thinking, who do I like as a female singer? I can honestly say that Annie Lennox for me was my. I thought she was absolutely wonderful. I loved the way she was so androgynous, and that she was such a strong woman, and I loved the tone of her voice, and I really loved her stuff. And then Barbara Streisand, I think, probably was from when I was a little girl. Barbara Streisand, my mother loved Barbara Streisand, so there was all these Barbara Streisand albums in the house, and I used to put them on, and I can remember sitting and listening to that beautiful tone that she had. You know, the style of song she sang was not particularly, maybe it was a bit not my thing, but God, I loved her voice so much. And then like Bonnie Raitt is probably my other really wonderful, the woman who I admire immensely, and who I really, really love to listen to. But you know, I think I kind of grew up with more male influenced singers than female. But I would say that Annie Lennox, Barbara Streisand, and Bonnie Raitt for me were my three top female artists. And Annie Lennox was definitely the woman who I used to look like. I had really short punk hair when I met Romeo's Craig. I had like really spiky hair, and I looked very punky, and I looked much more androgynous than I did when the first Romeo's Daughter albums came out. And that was one of the things they said to me after they saw like loads of women to audition, and I went in and I had blue nails and punk hair, and they called me and they went, "We really love your voice, but will you try and grow your hair? Because you don't look like a rock singer." I went, "All right, I'll try and grow my hair." I thought it was quite odd at the time. So yeah, those are the three for me.
It's funny because I can hear a little bit of those three in your voice.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, absolutely. Just in the tone of your voice. And
oh, that's nice. Thank you. That's a real compliment.
It can be clean, but it can also be a bit raspy if it goes into certain territory. There's a lot that can be done there. There's a lot of fluidity in your voice, which I absolutely admire.
Oh, thank you so much, Max. That's really kind of you. Thank you.
So now, and sorry for flip-flopping here, but I'm just curious, going into now Romeo's Daughter, meeting up with Craig and all that, they wanted a female vocalist, it sounds like. That's what they were going for from the very beginning. So they find you, and now you start working on songs. How does that begin, the songwriting process?
Yeah, that was God, that was really torturous, actually. We were all absolutely skint. We had a manager though who kind of opened up a house, and she had a studio in her house, and we would go every weekend. We would work during the week doing our different jobs, and we would go on the weekends, and it was really, really torturous. It took years, really, because I think we met in 1985, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't think we actually got a record deal till like maybe end of 1987. So as far as I can remember, we had like a good 2.5 to 3 years of writing, demoing. Also because we were kind of doing something that was a little bit unusual, having a rock band with a female singing. A lot of people kind of they weren't quite sure of who we were, and we didn't have a great response initially, I don't think, from the people maybe that our manager kind of played our stuff to, and really the catalyst for us was, luckily or unluckily, I'm not quite sure. In the long run, I'm not sure it did us that many favors, but luckily at the beginning, she was Mutt Lange's ex-wife, our manager. Her name is Olga Lange. And obviously at the time, he was this hugely famous guy, and he didn't give us the time of day. I mean, why would he? He was working on these incredible, he was busy for years. And anyway, for some reason, we wrote a song called Stay With Me Tonight, which we fully demoed. And this is like probably about 2 years down the line. And she played it to him. I mean, she probably like just forced him to have a listen to it. They were still friends, which was good. And he really, really liked this song. And that was for him when I think he thought, I quite like the sound of these guys. And we met him and we had a meeting with him. And from that first meeting, he went through our demos and he went, okay, this is the bit that I think is good in this song. This is the bit that I think is good in this song. And Craig, who is just the most wonderful songwriter, just kind of absorbed everything that he said. And we started then seriously to work with the advice that Mutt had given us, and then also on the songs that he really liked. And I can't really remember exactly what changed his mind with us, but maybe she just harangued him so much, Olga, that he just went, all right, I give in, I'm going to work with this band. But then I think he only planned to do a couple of songs with us, and then it ended up being half the album. Heaven in the Backseat was written with him. Some of the songs were written with him at the house. And so those came together much more quickly. And so, yeah, it's hard to remember exactly, to be honest, Max, exactly what happened. But then because of Mutt's saying he would get involved with us, then Jive got interested. And then from that, which is kind of what happens with a lot of bands, to be honest, you have one person who's kind of well known and goes, I'm interested in working with this band. And then it seemed to go pretty quickly from that point. We got a deal, I think in 1987, we finished recording the album in maybe end of 1980, middle of 1988. And it came out the end of 1988, beginning of 1989. So it seemed to take forever. And then all of a sudden it moved very, very quickly.
It's funny you mentioned Mutt Lange's busy schedule. I mean, and that was, I believe, from 84 to 87, he was working on Hysteria for Def Leppard, which took about 3 years to get. I mean, that record went over budget because
huge. I mean, just on an epic level. I mean, really, it really turned. But I mean, look, I mean, it went over budget, but wow, look what a huge success it was for them. And
I see your album, that first Romeo's Daughter album, almost as like the successor record in a lot of ways to Hysteria. And when it comes to songwriting and production, there's a lot of similarities. I feel it's almost like a sibling record in a lot of ways.
Also, don't forget the kind of the equipment that was being used at the time. You know, the desk that he used, the keyboards that he used, all that stuff was. I mean, now you have such a huge choice, but then, you know, people were using the new equipment that was coming out, and so a lot of the equipment that he used on Hysteria, he used on us, you know, the sounds. And so that is why there's definitely a similarity. But I mean, I don't know exactly what he used on Hysteria, but to be honest, our album is very simplified compared to you know, Hysteria. You know, there was, I mean, he tended to layer, he always layered, like, you know, sounds over sounds over sounds over sounds, and he used a Neve desk, and so obviously the desk was the same, so there was bound to be that similarity. It's the same when Shania Twain's first album came out. Everybody said Shania Twain's album sounded like our album, just because there was that continuity, and maybe also because he'd worked with us, and he didn't really like working with female singers very much. He was a little bit funny about that. I mean, his first wife was called Stevie, and she was a fantastic session singer. I'm not sure she ever produced or released a solo album. I might be wrong.
She became a vocal coach, I believe, into the 80s.
Correct.
And she even worked with Joe Elliott as his vocal coach at one point.
That's right.
And then I think she did do a record. It came out in 95.
Funny enough,
Mutt produced it, but it didn't really get any sort of.
Okay.
But there was one record that came out in the mid 90s.
So he worked with her, but he was a little bit I don't know. He wasn't, for some reason, I don't know. Maybe he thought we were. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he thought we were too emotional. I don't know. He was kind of a man's man, Mutt. You know. So I don't know. But so. Yeah, that's quite interesting. So that's why from that time you've got his albums that all sound a little bit similar, all good, but a little bit similar.
You mentioned something really interesting, which I heard he likes to do. He was picking apart bits from your demos. It wasn't necessarily the whole song. It'd be there'd be a piece here or a piece there.
Oh, absolutely. He would, absolutely. He would, he'd say, I like this bridge, or this is what you need to do in the chorus. Yeah, he very much so. He definitely dissected the songs because he had a formula that he worked to, and it worked, you know, and he knew he was such a talented musician. His ear was just extraordinary, you know, you could just hear things that you would think only dogs could hear, you know. It was like quite extraordinary, the things we go, what do you mean? And go, that, you know. So it was really, really interesting, how convoluted and intricate it all was, and yet it all made complete sense once you'd actually put it all down and you'd moved everything around, you know. I think for Craig, it's made Craig as a songwriter working with Mutt. You know, Craig, not only he's gone on to be an incredibly successful library music writer, like really successful. If you can, you know, he writes like so much stuff. He's written for other bands, he's written for other singers. He has gone on, and Craig also works to kind of a certain format, which I suppose a lot of songwriters do, and that is definitely what he's picked up from working with Mutt. It really was quite an extraordinary time for us. I wish we could go back now and actually maybe appreciate it a little bit more, you know. You don't realize when you're young that you don't realize that is going to be such a momentous thing in your life, you know. You're just young, you know, and you think, oh well, we'll do another, you know. That never happened with Mutt, unfortunately. But yeah, it was fantastic, and I feel very blessed to have been part of all of it.
Can't go without mentioning John Parr, who also worked.
Yeah,
on the
John,
record.
of course.
So
who was also at the time was like flying high. He like had a huge success, and I can't even remember how we met John. I think we met John socially doing something, and then he really wanted to work with Mutt. That was his big thing. He was, I mean, who didn't? And so he ended up producing, I think, 3 of the tracks, maybe 3 or 4 of the tracks of the first album. I don't think it ever worked out with him. I don't think he ever got to work with Mutt on a personal level on his own stuff. But John is fantastic. I still am friends with John, and we keep in touch, and that was really lovely as well. John was a lot of fun, you know. John was the fun side of working. Mutt was like kind of quite serious, and John was really good fun, and yeah, we all became really good friends.
I have to one thing that I really enjoy, and you brought this up a little bit earlier in our conversation, was the character in your voice, those inflections, those minor inflections that even Mutt Lange would put on your voice, those little hiccups and stuff that you would normally not do. But to me, it adds character to what you are doing in your performances. And that's something to me that is very evident in the album, that for as well produced as it is, your vocals are very human. The emotion is there. And I think that's very important to note about that production and that album.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think one of the things, and we've still done it, and somebody mentioned it the other day, a fan, they said they can always hear the breaths in between all my lines. And a lot of the time that is taken out now, especially a lot of people use the, what's it called? The tuner, the voice tuner thing, which takes out even more character. I mean, I don't understand, to be honest, why a lot of singers do that. I don't know why they feel they need to do that. But for us, I mean, a lot of this music as well is very personal. I mean, it's like they're love songs. They're very sexy, a lot of the songs. They're like very much about human emotion. And I think you have to try and put in as much emotion as you can when you're performing them. And that's what I try to do, you know. So I'm glad it comes across.
Yeah, well, thank you for that work, because it's a record I always go back to multiple times a year. Great. It's one of my favorite albums. To me, it's one of those albums that really should have been a smash in every way. I mean, on a commercial level, and not just a critical one, because I really do. It sounds to me, it's one of those records. There's a lot of albums out there that when you put on, there's just a magic to it, and you almost frightened and upset at times that it didn't get the accolades that it deserved. So to me, that's one of those albums that, to me, anybody that hasn't checked it out, it's been remastered on Rock Candy Records, which is a label in the UK that remasters lost records, made records that didn't get all the attention in the world, and kind of puts them back out into the
Yes.
market, which I think is really cool and really important. So you get a second shot at checking those albums out. You get
Yeah,
all
great.
extensive
Yeah.
liner notes, all that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I mean, thank goodness it was, actually, because we ran out of copies and it just kind of disappeared, you know, because obviously when our deal ended with Jive, uh, we didn't, you know, there was no way of getting hold of the album unless somebody was selling it for a fortune on Amazon or eBay. So it was really great that that Derek from Rock Candy did that, and they did a really lovely booklet as well, which we didn't have on the first time as well. So it was, they really put a lot of care in that album, because they felt very much like you, that it was, you know, quite, you know, one of the better albums that had been released at the end of the 80s in our genre, and that's really nice. It's also actually coming out on vinyl soon. We have a deal with a label in America called Renaissance, and they've just released one of our newer albums called Rapture on vinyl, and they're going to release the first album again on vinyl, which is really great, because obviously vinyl is coming back, and you know, so at least it's back, you know, and people can buy it if they want it. And it's lovely, you know, the people like you actually still, you know, promote it and enjoy it and listen to it, you know. I mean, we have had like 4 new albums since then, so I'm hoping, you know, people appreciate those as well. But I do understand the significance of you know, Romeo's Daughter 1 because of Mutt's involvement, and it really, you know, it gave us our fan base, and it enabled us to keep on doing what we're doing now, because we would never, you know, we couldn't believe it when we were offered a gig in 2009, a festival. We hadn't played for 18 years. We broke up for 18 years, and we all did other things. And we were asked to do this festival called Fire Fest, which was like a really great festival. It's not going anymore. It's in Nottingham, and the guy Kieran who organized it had been asking us for a couple of years to reform to play at this festival, because the whole thing about Firefest was bands from the 80s that they'd loved and 90s reforming to play at this festival. And when we got together and we did it in 2009, we were like, nobody's gonna know who the hell we are. We honestly, we were so ignorant about people's love for us. And I remember we walked out, we were so nervous. We hadn't done a gig for 18 years, or maybe even longer, 20 years. And we walked out on stage, like the roof went off the place. And we were like, how do these people even know who we are? And that was when we thought, oh, this is crazy that we're not still doing this. And obviously there was no social media before, there was no Facebook, there was no ways of us keeping in contact with anybody. So yeah, you know, it was wonderful. And I don't listen to it very often, I'll be absolutely honest. It's kind of, I forget. And then sometimes I'll just think, oh, I'll go and have a listen to the first album, and I listen, and it brings back wonderful memories. And I'm very proud of it. We all are. We're all very proud of it.
There's certain songs like I Cry Myself to Sleep at Night, and
Yeah.
Don't Break My Heart, and Velvet Tongue. Just phenomenal, like, and great headphone records too. I mean, you could put those
Yes.
records on and just dive
Yes.
into them. Fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, those 3 songs actually we still put in our live set. Took a while to get Don't Break My Heart in because it was so high. I was like, oh my, so we had to build our way up to that one. But Cry Myself to Sleep, it will be a song, you know, people sing it. They sing all the words when we gig, you know, they know it. That will always be a song. And Wild Child for us is also probably a song that we will always have in our set, just because people obviously then knew it from heart. And, you know, a lot of people couldn't understand why we were playing a heart song. You know, I had to put them right on that. So yeah, those are our, you know, those, in fact, those songs. So we got Cry Myself, Heaven in the Backseat, Velvet Tongue, Don't Break My Heart. We play like half of the first album in our live set still.
Do you have a favorite, a personal favorite song on that album?
I think for me, Cry Myself is Cry Myself and Him. I always think like Him was just one of those beautiful little moments, and it just came together really quickly, and we recorded it really quickly, and a lot of people got married to him. You know, they play yeah, but I think Cry Myself for me is just a really beautiful ballad. It's like I think it's hard beaten by a lot of rock ballads. I'd say it's pretty much up there for me, you know, in those kind of big 80 ballad songs. Yeah, for me, Cry Myself is still my favorite from that album.
And how did it feel having Heaven in the Backseat be included on a Nightmare on Elm Street film, which I think is really interesting?
I think that came through that was through Jive, and it was odd really, because I'm not really a fan of horror films, and I had to go and sit through it just to kind of hear it. It was a bit like I sat through the whole film with my hands over my eyes. I'm such a wuss. But yeah, it was great, and it was lovely having Freddie in the video. It was fun, you know. It was just like one of those fun things. You know, I think maybe at the time we thought, this is it, you know, this is it, this is just going to get better and better, and we're going to do more and more. And you know, we did this incredible radio tour of America, and we flew right across America, and we toured all the big radio stations, and we were driven around in limos. We were like, yay, this is it, this is great. And then, you know, it didn't happen for whatever reason, you know, bad management, just bad mistakes. You know, we were young, we didn't really understand. We trusted everybody who looked after us to do the right things, and a lot of the right things were missed and weren't done. And it's just one of those things that it just didn't. It maybe if it had come out in maybe in 88 or 87, it would have been different for us. Timing is everything, you know, and I think we just really missed the boat by about a year. Because of everything, how music changed, you know, in the 90s, and the genre, the stuff we were doing was seen as being a bit old hat. And so it didn't happen. But when we were in the moment and it was all great, it was fantastic, you know, it really was. We loved it.
Starting the sessions for the second album, was that sort of the idea that just you and the band were going to collect demos and then bring them to a producer at some point? Was that the initial plan?
Well, Mutt was going to do the second album. Mutt had said that he wanted to record the whole of the second album, but that we had to wait for him. And I think he was working on Bryan Adams, and I don't know. There were a few things. He had to do the new Bryan Adams album. And we went, great. And Jive went, great. You know, this is going to be great. You know, Mutt's going to do the whole of the second album, and we'll just build on the strength of the first one. And you know, we waited and we waited and we waited. And I think we waited like 3 years. And in the end, he just couldn't do it. He got himself like tied up in a lot of different things, and his commitments changed, and he couldn't do it. And it was obviously a kind of the death knell for Romeo's Daughter to a certain extent, because really we should have followed up with the second album like way before then. And it was so disappointing to hear that. And then we had to go and find then Jive weren't interested, and we lost our deal at Jive, and then we had to go and find a new record deal, and it kind of all turned into a bit of a mess, to be honest. We had two producers working on the second album. And I mean, interestingly, I think there's some fantastic songs on Delectable. It just doesn't sound great. You know, sound wise, it wasn't a patch for us on what we'd done with Mutt. But it was a real pity, because there are some very good songs on there. And so that was also, after Delectable, we were very disillusioned. We were now in like 1992 or 1993, and we're like, what are we doing? We've missed the boat. And so we kind of decided at that point that we were going to have a break from each other. We'd also been together for 10 long years, and there'd been a lot of disappointment in that time. And we all felt that it was probably time to kind of just maybe see if there was something else that we wanted to do with our lives, because it was, you know, financially very difficult. We weren't making very much money, and, you know, sometimes you just got to get on with your life. And so Delectable for us just kind of moved on, and we kind of forgot about it. interestingly, now Delectable is some of our fans' favorite album, which we think is incredible, really, because we can't understand why they would prefer it. But I think sometimes rock fans don't like things very smooth and built. They like a bit of like raucousness, and Delectable definitely had that. But we played some of the Delectable songs as well in our live set. We try and cover like a few songs from every album, really. So yeah, Delectable for us. Craig hates when we talk about Delectable because he's so disappointed in it. He's like, no, he really doesn't. He doesn't have as much affection for it as I do.
There's good songs on that. I like the opening track, Have Mercy, and
Yeah,
the
we
single,
play Have Mercy. Yeah,
I think that to me has a I was almost convincing myself this could have been the song that Mutt would have like had his hands all over, because it has that
you're probably right,
those same
actually.
elements with the backing vocals, the big
Yeah,
band
yeah,
vocals and all
yeah,
that. So
you're right. You're
the
right
big
about
guitar
that.
riff, right? And then
Yeah, absolutely.
Attracted to the Animal, which was released as a single as well. I think that's a strong song too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
great. There is some great material on there. Like you said, maybe it's just more like the Sonics weren't all there, but
No, absolutely. And I think, as well, we were a bit fed up by then. I think, we just I can't remember exactly, but I remember there was a feeling of, oh, what are we, what's the point, really? We were the label called Music for Nations, and they were great, but we didn't get very much support. And once again, I think we'd missed the boat on it all. And so we were kind of playing catch up all the time. And that's not a good position to be in, and so I think that when we decided to get back together again after 2009, and we recorded Rapture, which was our first album back together, it was like a really kind of different experience. We were just like, oh, let's see what happens. Let's record these. We did it ourselves. There wasn't really any pressure on us. And then the same thing with Spin. We've actually just finished a new album, which we'll be releasing next year. And it's a very different kind of experience recording. I tend to just do it with Craig. Craig writes a lot of the tracks, Andy puts the drums down. We don't do it together. We do it kind of singularly, and then we send everything in. Well, also through lockdown, that was the only way you could do it. And they take ages to do because we're busy doing lots of other things, but we wouldn't hate to put out anything that was substandard and something that we weren't really proud of. And so, that's what we'll just keep on doing. Not everybody's going to love everything you do all the time. Certain people have got, when they kind of taken to your hearts, your fans expect something of you. And sometimes when you do something that's different, they really make it very clear that they're not very keen on that. It's quite an odd thing about how, when you make an album, you want to please your fans, but you also have to please yourselves. And so that's always quite interesting when you release something, because you never know if anybody's going to like it or not. So far, we've been very lucky. They've all been really well received. Obviously, it's a cottage industry. We only get them out to the fans that know that we're about. And so, that's fine. That's fine. We're older now. We can't expect to do what we did when we were in our 20s, and we don't expect that. In fact, we don't want it. It would be too much hard work. So we just release albums when we're ready, when we've got the songs that we think are good, and when we're happy with our performances. And that's how we'll probably keep on doing it until, for some reason, we can't do it anymore.
So you've gone back to the mentality you had at the very beginning. Really, it comes full circle. It's all about having fun. It's all about enjoying
very much so.
the work. It's not about stressing about it.
So very, very much so.
To me, the second part of your career, starting these last 3 records now, they're the last 2 and the upcoming one. I mean, it seems to me like you're back in that place of just enjoying the experience overall.
Oh, very much so. We wouldn't do it if we didn't. As I said before, we're all very busy. So, and for me personally, it's quite interesting as a singer. I don't get to sing nearly as much as I would like to, just because of time constraints, and life. And so when I go in to do a vocal, it takes me a little bit of time to get my confidence back, because I'm not that much of a fan of listening back to myself. And so when I do, I'm very critical of what I hear. But the older I get, I don't think my voice has changed that much. And so I still think I sound quite similar to how I sounded when I was younger. I probably just don't have the same range as I did. And that's kind of a natural thing, because obviously as you get older, things change in your body. And especially when you don't sing as much, your range, you have to like practice a lot to get your range really high. And I don't really want to have to sing that high anymore, because I think my tone has always been a little bit better when it's a little bit in a lower range. And so, I get huge joy out of singing. All the endorphins go crazy after I've had a day singing with Craig. I'm on cloud nine. It's for me, it's the best thing that I could possibly do in my spare time is sing, and I'll carry on doing it for as long as people want me to, really.
Wonderful. I always admire genuine artists who do it for the passion and who through it all just persevere. And it seems to me like you're one of those kinds of artists who you're doing it from the heart. It's all about perseverance for you, and you actually really do care about the work that you do.
Oh, very much so. We would never, I think a lot of pressure is put on bands to a certain extent that have record deals, and they have to release an album every 1 or 2 years. And you can tell a lot of the time with that, in that they haven't had the time. It's like authors, a lot of the time their best books are their first book, and then they write a really quick second one and it's never as great. And then they have time to go, and then, so we don't have those pressures on us. We don't need to do that. So we have a lot of songs that we go through before we decide on the ones that we want to actually record. And it's quite interesting, because at the moment, so once we've recorded something and we demo mix it, we only finally mix them when we've decided on all 10 of the songs. And so Craig sends them to me once I put the vocal down and everything's down, and then he'll send me the demo mix, and then I live with the tracks and we have a listen. We think, oh, do we like this? What, drum sounds, all that stuff that you go through when you listen to a track. And there's the song that I thought that I wasn't that crazy on when I actually recorded now is my absolute favorite song. It changes all the time with the songs, and that is what I think is one of the good things about Romeo's Daughter, is that I think, especially with Craig's songwriting, it's called like an earworm, when a song goes in your head and you think, oh, and then all of a sudden you think, oh, that's and you go back and you listen to it again, and I think his songs have this way of just kind of creeping up on you, and you're thinking, oh, that's like, wow, that's really good. That one's better than I thought it was. And I'm going through this thing now where every time I listen to the tracks, there's one that I prefer, and I think, oh yeah, that's and so that's what I hope people think when they listen to our albums. They don't make a decision straight away on their favorite song. They listen and then they change their mind, and then they hear something that's of merit in a song that maybe they weren't that keen on when they first heard it. I think that is kind of the Romeo's Daughter thing. I don't think it's always that obvious with us, and then the more you listen, the more you hear things that you like.
Yeah, the songwriting is very layered. There's a lot of layers to it that reveal themselves through multiple listens. And I think that's, to me, one of the things that I gravitate towards, because I love music that just keeps you coming back for more. And every time you put it on, you're going to hear something different or notice something different, whether it just reveals itself over time. And I think that, to me, is what makes it magical, is that factor of it's not about the quick fix. It's about that replay value.
Yeah.
So
yes,
very important to me as a music listener and fanatic. The last 2 records you put out were I thought that they were really, really well put together. I thought they were phenomenal, to say the least. I think it was almost like the beginning of a new start. It was like a whole new start, almost like a new band in a way. It was like, so it
Yes.
sounded fresh and reinvigorated.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
what can you say about the new record now? Is there anything you can mention about it?
Well, the new I think the new record, we've got a couple of heavier songs on the new record. And what I mean by heavier is that I've always like thought that Craig is like a phenomenal guitarist. He really is. You know, in the UK, he really stands up against like any of the great guitarists that have come out of this country and in our genre. And I've always thought that maybe we should like, he should do more. He should like, his solo should be a little bit bigger, and you know, the riff sometimes should be a little bit heavier. And so we've actually got like about 3 or 4 songs that are quite sassy. And I really enjoyed singing them. And they're like, you know, they're a bit like, you know, FU songs, you know, excuse my French. They're really, you know, I would say that they're heavier than a lot of the stuff that we've done. But then we also obviously we've got like a beautiful, like a ballad, which is kind of sounds like a little bit like a Disney ballad to me. It's like really sweet. It's a really pretty song, but it's really, really catchy. And then we've, you know, got a few of like the quirky ones that, you know, we always tend to have similar, we've always got like a really pared down song. Like we had him, and we had a song called Will Be, we had a song called Sugar Daddy on Delectable. And we've got one of those songs on this album that's just really, it's just kind of guitar and me singing. And so I'm excited. I mean, you know, all we can do is our best. You know, that's all you can do. And when we release it, we're just gonna hope that the people who like us like it. And you know, it's a really scary but a really lovely thing to share with the fans, our fans and new fans. You know, quite interesting actually. Recently I've been getting, maybe it's through Renaissance, I've been getting quite a lot of orders through our shop for America, because I think America, you know, when we did the radio tour, we never went back after that. You know, we never toured there. That was it. We did some gigs, you know, we did some radio interviews, we did some store stuff, and that was it. Never again. We never went back. And I always believed that America would be our biggest market if it had been maybe promoted in the correct way. And so for us, really, we're going to try and do a little bit more and get our albums released in America, something like just in shops so that people can buy them. You know, it's really hard for people to buy our stuff over there. You know, they have to buy it from our shop or get it from the stuff that's on Amazon. So, you know, yeah, it's all good. It's all good, Max. You know, it's wonderful. We love it. We do it with love. We release it with love. We got to hope we get some love back. That's all you can really ask for at this stage in our lives.
It's a different time now too, for better or worse, right? I mean, everything's immediately accessible, but there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of content because of it, because anybody can do it now. There's no, there used to be gatekeepers. You had the MTV, you had radio promoters. Now it's just an open floodgate.
Yes.
And that can be good and that can be bad. That's why I started doing this, because I think we need more people who are passionate about music to have, no matter how many podcasts, radio shows, doesn't matter, but more filters, more people that you can trust with their ear,
very much so.
More personalities to say, listen to this is really good. Support these bands, right? So that's why I appreciate you taking the time to do this, because you're one of those artists that, to me, and Romeo's Daughter in general, is one of those bands that deserves the attention, deserves the accolade.
Well, thank you.
And
well, it's lovely to be asked. You know, it's an honor to be asked, and it's lovely that you've taken so much care, and you really know what you're talking about. You know, and you obviously know our music really well, and that, you know, is that never ceases to amaze me. That people, you know, it's always like a real honor to hear that, you know.
just remember this. Thank Mutt, because I went through a period where all I did was go through his discography, because
Oh,
I'm one of those.
really?
I like producers, so every now and then, if there's a producer with a certain sound,
Yes.
I want to go through everything that they've ever worked on.
Oh, I
And
see. So that's how you
your record
heard
popped
us.
up. Yeah, your record
Oh, I
popped up, and I said
see.
1988. What is this? And um,
Right.
it went from there, and I was immediately floored. I said, how did this pass me? I couldn't believe it, but
Who
I
are
think
these guys?
it made it that much more magical, the fact that it's almost like this lost album that sounds like a classic. So I think it only
No,
made, because I can be very selfish as a listener. I say, this is only for me.
yeah.
So I said, oh, this is great. So I know something that the world doesn't really know about.
Right,
Fantastic. But
right.
now, of course, I can provide the exposure for people and say, this is
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. And, the more people that hear it, they might all of a sudden think, wow, this is like the whole genre of music from that time that they didn't even know existed, especially if they're younger people, there's still a huge fan base for people who love our kind of music. It's quite interesting. The other day I was reading that the bands that had made the most money in touring in the last, 10 years. And it was, I think, top of the list was the Stones, and there was Bruce Springsteen and U2, and they were all rock bands from, it's like, we're only the new guys. Nobody, they weren't even on this list. Paul McCartney was on there, Def Leppard were on there, and it's a Kiss. It's like, well, how come they're still the bands that are making the most out of touring? It's still quite staggering, really, because you don't really think of it like that. Because all you're hearing when you turn on the radio is music from now, music that's really not particularly different. A lot of the time you can't really tell who you're listening to, because it all sounds very similar, that genre of whatever it is. So I find it quite interesting that it's those bands that are still making the most money out of touring.
Yeah, I think it comes down to songs and legacy. And I think at the end of the
Yeah.
day, those songs, there's an enduring quality. There's the way that they were written. It wasn't about, these are bands and artists that spent time, lots of time on craft and development. And we don't have that. I'm not trying to sound old school here, but I don't think it's wrong to say that people should spend more time. I think it's a different world now. Everything is about immediacy. And I think that has bled into artists and people in songwriting. It's not about taking time anymore. And I think the results suffer because of that. Because to me, it's art. And at the end of the day, there is no time stamp on that. I think it needs to be crafted. And I think these artists that are in the top 10 right now, whether it be the Stones, Springsteen, Kiss, Def Leppard, these are artists that took time on their work, and it shows, because those songs are still being played, rotated, unforgettable music there. And to me, the Beatles are always gonna last. There's always gonna be the Beatles. There's always going to
thank
be
God for
the
the
Stones.
Beatles. Yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to. And that's why I think it's important to promote artists. There are plenty of artists out there, whether it be through factions like Bandcamp, independent music labels that just aren't getting enough attention, and they should be. They're actually taking the time to write great songs and craft great songs. I think they need more attention. We need to flip the script a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a conglomerate, isn't it? They've just kind of gobbled up so much of it, and the music industry has become very corporate. And I don't know whether it was as much. Used to get like a 3-album deal when you used to sign before, and now you're lucky if you get a couple of singles, really. So how do you hone your art? Also gigging, in this country, it's hard, especially since lockdown. It's affected the gigs, and a lot of gigs have had to close. So when we were starting out, we used to get in a little white transit van that Craig used to own, and we just gigged up and down the country. That was how you kind of got good at playing live. I really think now, how do bands now do that? Where can they play? You know, you need a promoter to put you on. If they don't know you, you're not going to get a gig. So it's very different. Must be very tough for young bands now to do what we did.
Well, on a brighter note, thank you for the new music. Thank you for, I cannot wait to hear what's in store.
Oh, that's very kind, Max. I'll send you a copy as soon as it's out.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It means the world. Just name your price. I love what you guys are doing. I really appreciate it with all my heart.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for taking the time to add some credibility to something I'm starting out here, only like a year and a few months into doing this, but hopefully we can get places with it. And
great.
All thanks to people like you for taking the time.
Oh, well, thank you, Max. You know, and it's people like you that keep people like us going, you know, and spreading the word. And it's been lovely talking to you, and good luck with your podcast. You know, I'll be listening out for it.
Thank you so much. Leigh Matty, Romeo's daughter, the very best, one of the greatest singers in my book. So thank you so much again. And
thank you so much.
You always have an open seat here on Sonic Thorns.
Oh,
so
brilliant. Thank you
like
so
to have
much.
you on. Once the record's out, come back.
Once the record's out. Okay, great stuff.
Until next time.
Thank you so much, Max. Take it easy.
You too.
Bye.